a couple of things just to point out here is that, in releasing these codes, CMS was very thoughtful about creating boundaries or minimal requirements because we want to make sure that, these patients are receiving care that has parity to in-person care. And so, the RTM reimbursement codes require that both the patients and the providers have to meet specific criteria. And some of those require that the patients are actually actionable and accountable in their care. Is, one of the stipulations, they have to report data for at least 16 days out of a month. And that the providers also have to be active. And so they have to actually, maintain minimal standards of reviewing patients' inputs. So that we're really thinking about not only improving access, but actually delivering a certain level of care, so that the patients are still getting appropriate and successful outcomes from their treatment. And so, it's important not just to think about the codes themselves, but actually to think about, what the outcome looks like. And so it's really important as we think about virtual care being reimbursed, that the care delivers the outcomes that patients expect. And that those outcomes are being measured and delivered back to the care team. And so it really is, it's really has to be a true ecosystem of care. And all care, should be predicated on delivering an outcome to the patients. So, the beauty of virtual care, and, in my humble opinion, especially, it should be a provider-driven. So we want to make sure that the care is specific and personal for that patient's diagnosis and needs. It shouldn't just be a open source YouTube video that they're getting care from. So, with a well-constructed technology infrastructure and virtual care delivery system, rural patients actually stand to gain a lot because they can access their own providers in a closed system and receive the care that they need based upon their own diagnosis. And this is a really important point because a lot of times, because patients were either rural or underinsured or underserved, that would result in a poor outcome. And so the opportunity that we have before us today is, with truly, well-designed provider-based digital care systems, rural patients can receive exactly the care they need from their own provider organization, regardless of their barriers to access that care in person. And we did a really interesting study at a large academic health system in the middle of Pennsylvania, where the average patient had a 45-minute commute to their closest care provider, and found that patients that were actually furthest away from their care provider were the most engaged in their digital care plans. So they were actually really needing to be, connected. And so they really relied on the digital infrastructure that was provided by their health system to engage in their care. And they did really well. So their outcomes were really good because they could actually, for the first time, access the right care, as opposed to having to travel in and all the barriers that can, prevent that from happening in a scalable and a positive way. I think we're a little early on in the whole journey, but I do think that the trends have been established. And as CMS provides additional guidance surrounding the nuances of remote therapeutic monitoring, and as digital stakeholders develop more efficient monitoring and automation features, I think the benefits and the awareness of the benefits of remote therapeutic monitoring will spur uptake of remote therapeutic monitoring. So in my opinion, I think it's going to be important to closely monitor regulatory and payer developments around RTM, and make sure that those boundaries and those regulations that are in place are strictly adhered to and are consistent with reimbursement. But I think overall, it's pretty clear that remote care is the future and it's here to stay. And these new codes and this trend is certainly indicative of that. And so I think we can anticipate continued innovation in the digital health space, as well as, rising acknowledgement of the benefits of digital and remote care as this reimbursement coverage improves and increases. And, as with all kind of new, and people will say this isn't that new because we had remote patient monitoring before that, but I think it's important to, go in with a little bit of trepidation. I mean, CMS typically, dips a toe and then examines the efficiency and the parameters of their codes that they've released, and then they sometimes pull back and they iterate. So ultimately, this is just the beginning, and I think we'll see where it lands. But the bottom line here is that remote and digital care are a fundamental aspect of orthopedic care provision, and will continue to play an increasingly large role in ensuring that high quality care is available to the broader patient population, regardless of access, of their access issues.